My husband remarried while I was hospitalized. His new wife exclaimed upon seeing me, "She is my CEO." "You can't even do household chores, so we might as well get a divorce. And you better give me your assets too," Brandon said with a smirk, walking into my hospital room. I was hooked up to so many machines, but that didn't stop him. A girl I didn't know stood next to him. Brandon didn't realize I had $10 million in assets. He should understand that a divorce in this situation would be a matter of life and death for a housewife like me. "Fine, here are the divorce papers," I said. I couldn't stay with a man who verbally abused his wife. I pulled out the divorce papers I always carried with me and handed them to Brandon. Grinning, he accepted them. "Now I can finally say goodbye to you. I'll be happy with her, so don't worry," Brandon said, wrapping his arm around the girl's waist. Her name was Gabriella. Brandon sneered at me and she said, "Take care, Mrs. O. You're not Mrs. anymore. Take care, ma'am." They both laughed as they left the room, but their happiness wouldn't last. Alone in the room, I laughed out loud. Today is Friday, so the divorce will be processed on Monday. I can't wait for 3 days from now. My name is Ariana Wallace. I'm a 47-year-old housewife. My family runs a regular farm. I don't have any special skills, but I'm proud of my vast cooking repertoire. My husband, Brandon, is the same age as me, and we were college classmates. We both came to Florida from the countryside since we both lived alone. I used to cook various dishes for Brandon, using the vegetables and rice from my family. People often said I captured his heart through his stomach, and I knew it was true. Brandon has always been incapable of doing any household chores. I've been taking care of him since we started dating, and after we got married, I continued to handle all the household tasks. Sadly, we didn't have children, but we enjoyed our life together as a couple. We both loved to eat, and on Brandon's days off, we'd often go on drives to enjoy delicious food. When we first got married, Brandon was kind, but after about 5 years, he became controlling. He never hit me, but his remarks became harsh, often saying, "Whose money do you think we're living on?" Those words hurt, but I didn't have the energy to fight back, assuming he wouldn't listen anyway. Being a full-time housewife made me feel inferior, and I couldn't stand up to him. Brandon joined a well-known company after graduating from university, but quit after about 6 years. He quickly found new jobs, but would resign from them after short periods. Because of this, our income was unstable. We managed by looking for money-saving tips, but often struggled with our finances. However, at the company he'd been with for the past 3 years, he seemed to get along with his colleagues. I had faint hopes he might stay there for a long time. Then, one day, Brandon came home earlier than usual. "I'm home, I quit my job," he said. "What again?" I said, surprised. Brandon's eyebrows twitched. I stopped cooking and rushed over to him. "I'm sorry, I was just shocked. No welcome back, and you're criticizing what I do?" "You've become quite bold," Brandon said. His words made me freeze. Brandon was in a very bad mood, and if I said the wrong thing, it could get worse. "I'm sorry," I said. "As long as you understand," he replied, somewhat placated. He sat on the sofa and turned on the TV. I quietly placed a beer and a glass on the table. "Do you want dinner or a bath?" I asked. "Food and alcohol," he replied. To avoid upsetting Brandon, I played the role of a submissive wife. I once had a strong sense of self, but after 16 years of marriage to Brandon, since the age of 30, I showed my true self. After eating and drinking to his heart's content, Brandon fell asleep, snoring on the sofa. The table was a mess, like a child had eaten there. I cleaned up the fallen beer bottles and food scraps on the floor. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Recalling my dreams of a happy married life from my girlhood days, my true feelings slipped out. I glanced at Brandon suddenly, but he showed no signs of waking. Relief washed over me, but I also felt dread about continuing this life. Maybe I should consider divorce. I started planning my schedule for the next day, determined to face the issues I had been avoiding. The next day, Brandon started visiting the employment office and quickly secured another job. While he was job hunting, I went to the city office and signed divorce papers. I wasn't ready to submit them, but having them felt like a kind of protection. I hid the signed divorce papers at the bottom of my bag. If Brandon found them, who knows what he might say or do. "Hey, where did you go while I was job hunting?" he asked. I went to the stationery store to buy some resumes. Look, I thought you might need them, I said, trying to sound normal. Brandon, who got home before I did, initially interrogated me suspiciously but quickly cheered up. I handed him the resumes I had bought earlier. After receiving them, Brandon said he was going out for drinks with a friend and left. Brandon's new job was at a reputable company with a solid salary and better benefits than any job he'd had before. When he got promoted after working there for about 2 years, he celebrated with a drink. I secretly hoped that maybe this time he would work there until retirement. Brandon's department seemed to be in sales, and he started to leave home more frequently for evening events. I enjoyed my brief moments of freedom and gathered energy to greet Brandon with a smile when he returned. One day I received a call from my mother after a long time. Hearing her excited story took me by surprise. $10 million? I asked, stunned. Yes, $10 million. You know the mountains and lands we owned? We don't need them anymore. We had them appraised and they are worth $15 million. We only need $3 million to enjoy the rest of our lives, so I think you might want to rethink your life too, she said. My mother was never fond of Brandon. She was worried about me, especially after Brandon became more controlling, preventing me from even visiting my childhood home. I was stunned by the amount she mentioned. Furthermore, I was shocked to learn that when my mother inherited the property from my grandmother, she changed the title to my name so there were no inheritance taxes. It's better not to tell Brandon, but the final decision is yours, she said, hanging up the phone. I felt conflicted between the urge to immediately inform Brandon and the desire to live freely with that money. About a week later, I was involved in a traffic accident. Thankfully, my life wasn't in danger, but I'd need to stay in the hospital for about a week. After storing my valuables in the hospital room drawer, I immediately contacted Brandon. I'm sorry I got injured, I said. Huh? What about my meals? Brandon's reaction made me almost laugh, prioritizing his meals over my injury. I'll need to be hospitalized for a week. I'm sorry, but could you buy your meals elsewhere until then? Not even preparing meals for your husband? What a lazy wife. Oh wait, I'm coming over now, Brandon said and ended the call abruptly. I was planning to tell him about the inheritance tonight, but now I thought it might be best not to mention it. Looking at all the tubes attached to me, I had a feeling my intuition was right. You're useless, can't even do housework. Let's get a divorce and you better pay me compensation too, Brandon said with a smirk as soon as he entered the room. I was connected to several machines, and a girl I didn't recognize stood beside him. Brandon didn't know that my total assets amounted to $10 million. He should realize that a divorce under these circumstances would be a life and death matter for me, a housewife. With this, I can finally say goodbye to you. I'm going to be happy with her, right, Gabriella? Brandon said, wrapping his arm around the girl's waist. The girl named Gabriella leaned against Brandon and scoffed at me. Take care, madam. Oh, you're not a madam anymore, so take care, old lady, she said. With those words, they both left the room laughing, but their joy would be short-lived. Left alone in my room, I burst out laughing. Today is Friday, so the divorce papers would only be processed on Monday. Oh, I cannot wait for 3 days from now. Just as I had expected, the weekend went by without any contact from Brandon, and it was quite peaceful. I was restless, not used to doing anything since getting married. I was always busy. Every time I got restless, the nurses told me to stay calm. Then, on Monday evening, I received a bunch of calls from Brandon. I ignored them at first, but after 15 minutes of constant ringing, I decided to answer. Could you not be so persistent? I said. Hey, what's the meaning of this? Brandon shouted as soon as I picked up. I couldn't help but laugh. Brandon seemed infuriated by my laughter and started screaming incoherently. What are you talking about? I asked. Don't play dumb. The divorce papers aren't being accepted, are they? Brandon was huffing and puffing on the other side of the phone. I continued to chuckle and responded to his complaint. Oh, I had previously filed a non-acceptance notification. Remember how you used to say, let's get divorced every time we fought? I thought it wouldn't be good if you filed for divorce on a whim during one of our arguments. Ew, but I don't need that now. Withdraw it immediately, Brandon demanded. I can't do that until I'm discharged. We need to go through procedures at the municipal office, I said. Then discharge now, don't be unreasonable. His selfish demands made me laugh even more. He probably wanted to register his marriage with Gabriella, whom he brought on Friday. By the way, was her name Gabriella? She's your mistress, right? Hey, that's rude to Gabriella. Apologize. She's my new wife. We are not divorced yet, so she's technically your mistress, isn't she? I responded calmly. Brandon made a weird groaning sound. I decided to hit him where it hurt the most. By the way, you'll hear from my lawyer about the division of property. That's right, property, including this trouble. You better share properly. I'm not sure why he misunderstood, but Brandon suddenly sounded in high spirits. After all, the responsible party has to pay the compensation. I had always done my household chores diligently, and of course I had never cheated on him. It's clear as day that Brandon is the responsible party. What are you misunderstanding? You're the one who has to give me the assets, Brandon responded, genuinely confused. He likely believed that by not taking care of him while I was hospitalized, I would truly be at fault. Even in my parents' time, one wouldn't be deemed at fault for such a reason. I bitterly thought this as I listened to his rant. I explained to him patiently, "What fault of mine are you talking about? Just so you know, not being able to do housework because I'm in the hospital doesn't make me at fault. You've abandoned taking care of me. If you were a child, it would be considered neglect, but you're an adult and should be able to take care of yourself. That's why it doesn't make me at fault." "If I say you're at fault, then you're at fault," Brandon insisted. Even a judge would be shocked by his baffling logic. I pictured myself face-palming. Did he think such childish reasoning would work? Don't you know what's legally defined as grounds for fault? Being at fault means things like infidelity, like having another woman despite having a wife. That's why Gabriella is my new wife, and you're no longer of any use to me, so it doesn't apply, right? What are you talking about? Since you were dating her behind my back, it's cheating, I said. Brandon still didn't seem to understand. He was set on believing he was right. Either way, please communicate through a lawyer from now on. Goodbye. "Hey, Ariana!" he shouted, but I hung up the phone without listening to his protests. He called multiple times, but when I ignored him, he eventually gave up and went silent. I was relieved, but the next day, another headache-inducing event occurred. Feeling frustrated by the non-stop ringing from 9 o'clock in the morning, I pressed the call button on the other end. Brandon was complaining at me like a machine gun. At first, I wasn't sure what he was saying, but piecing it together, it seemed he was complaining about not being able to withdraw money from a bank account. If it's a joint account, Brandon should be able to withdraw without any issue. But if not, I recalled the bank cards and passbooks I had left at home and asked, "Were you trying to take money from my account by any chance?" "Exactly, you're still in the hospital and I was going to take the money in the account, but the card won't work," Brandon rumbled on with his unreasonable argument. It seemed he didn't understand what I said yesterday when I was scheduled to be hospitalized for a week. I called the bank and requested they prevent withdrawals until I was discharged. I could handle it personally after being discharged. It was to prevent Brandon, who was reckless with money, from depleting my savings while I was in the hospital. My decision was proven right. It's unthinkable to try to withdraw money from the account of an ex-wife you've divorced. However, Brandon didn't see anything wrong with it and asked me to make a withdrawal immediately. "What are you talking about? We are practically strangers now. Why would I do as you say?" I replied. "You and my life haven't changed even if we're getting divorced. Act like a proper wife and listen to me," Brandon insisted. "We are not legally divorced yet, but we are already strangers, got it?" "Unfortunately, I don't have money to give to strangers," I said. Brandon was shocked since I had never resisted him this much before, but he quickly became assertive again. "Just do as I say. Send the money now. Pay the compensation for not doing housework," he demanded. Even though he was academically capable when we first met, he seemed to lack common sense. 18 years into our marriage, it was clear I had made a poor choice in a partner. Brandon seemed frustrated that I wasn't giving in. He likely had exhausted his cash on hand and probably dipped into the living expenses I had left at home and from our shared account. I spoke to Brandon as if I was talking to a small child. "Listen, I'm no longer your submissive wife. We'll settle a property division through a lawyer later on." "What, you're so insolent? I'm coming over right now." "Just wait," Brandon said, hanging up the phone. I didn't mind if he came to the hospital, but I had already asked the nurses' station not to let anyone in except for my parents, so it was unlikely he'd make it to my room. Brandon did come to the hospital, but as expected, he was stopped at the nurses' station. My phone kept ringing, but after ignoring it for a while, it switched to messages, and my screen was flooded with notifications. I saved all of them as evidence and contacted my lawyer. After a while, it seemed the lawyer had gotten in touch with Brandon as the messages stopped coming in. I thought it was the end, but my hopes were about to be dashed. "There's a visitor named Charlotte. Would you like to see her? Charlotte, please let her in." Charlotte was a friend who shared my hobbies back then when I was single. Charlotte and I became close after she responded to my posts on social media where I shared my dining experiences. We discovered we lived nearby and often went out to eat together. After getting married, I couldn't dine out as much to save money, but we kept in touch by regularly meeting for tea and chats. "Ariana, are you okay from the injury?" Charlotte asked as soon as she entered the room. "Yes, I'm feeling much better now, thank you," I replied. Charlotte's immediate concern warmed my heart. I realized that since my hospitalization, aside from my parents and the hospital staff, no one had shown concern for me. "Hey, Ariana, things are tough for you right now, aren't they?" Charlotte asked. "Huh? Why?" I hadn't told anyone about my situation other than my parents. I wondered how Charlotte knew and asked her. Charlotte then said something shocking. "You know Gabriella, the young girl, right? She's having an affair with your husband, isn't she?" "What? How do you know about that?" "Wait, you know her? She's my niece," Charlotte replied hesitantly. I was so surprised that I couldn't close my mouth. Who would have thought that Charlotte was Gabriella's aunt? The room went silent. It was the first time there was silence when Charlotte was around, and it made me feel uneasy. Gabriella suddenly told her mother, my sister, that she's getting married. What's more shocking is that her partner is 47 years old. When I saw the photo, it was your husband. I was so surprised. "I've already told my sister. I'm so sorry for all the trouble my niece has caused you, Ariana." "Don't apologize, Charlotte. It's not your fault," I said. Charlotte looked like she was about to cry. "I'm thinking of demanding compensation from Gabriella. I can't compromise on that, but if I do, does this mean our relationship will end?" "Of course not. I want to continue being friends with you, Ariana. I'll make sure Gabriella pays compensation. Neither my sister nor I can forgive what she's done. We'll keep a close eye on her." I was very grateful for Charlotte's words. We've been friends for over 22 years. I didn't want to lose a precious friend because of my terrible husband and his mistress. Hey, pause for a moment. Would you care to support us? Like this video and subscribe for more? Now let's dive back into the story. "I scheduled a meeting with them tomorrow and I'd like you to come with me," Charlotte said. "Of course, I'll be there, and I can also provide photos as evidence of their affair." The next day, fresh from being discharged from the hospital, I prepared for the meeting. I went to a private restaurant room with my lawyer. Brandon and Gabriella had already arrived and were indulging in an expensive traditional meal. I was speechless at their audacity. "You finally made it. Did you bring the money?" "Remember, you were paying for this meal," Brandon said without even stopping his meal. Gabriella continued to eat with a smug look on her face. I decided to fight back. "Please handle the payment yourselves. I came here to demand a fair share of the assets from the two of you." "How long are you going to scold you? You're unattractive," Brandon remarked rudely, ignoring his comments. My lawyer and I took our seats and showed evidence proving Brandon was at fault. We first presented legal documents about the liability reasons, followed by documents on property division. Lastly, we showed the photos Charlotte had provided, which showed Gabriella and Brandon together, as well as Gabriella with another man entering a hotel. "Wait, why? Hey, Gabriella, what is this?" Brandon and Gabriella were visibly shaken by the photos and finally stopped eating. Just then, Charlotte made her timely entrance. "I took those photos," Charlotte said. Gabriella seemed confused as to why her aunt was present. With cold eyes, Charlotte looked down at Gabriella and Brandon and calmly spoke about being friends with me for 22 years and how their actions were despicable. "Gabriella, you mentioned that the baby you're carrying is his, but given your actions, who knows who the father is?" "Wait, no, This was the first time I was hearing about her pregnancy. Judging by her appearance today, one would never guess she was pregnant. However, Brandon's reaction showed he believed her claim. "So, you're pregnant? In that case, after a DNA test, I'll demand an additional penalty." "No, I'm sorry. I lied about the pregnancy. Please forgive me," Gabriella suddenly admitted, bowing deeply. She had been searching for wealthy old men, and Brandon was her target. He bought her designer goods and promised her a life where she wouldn't have to work and could do as she pleased. She believed she could be a housewife and occasionally have flings with men of her choice. She had once lied about being pregnant because Brandon showed no signs of wanting to divorce. Brandon froze with his mouth agape when he heard this. "I'm truly sorry, but I can't give you anything. I don't have the money," he said. "I'll pay Ariana in advance. Gabriella, you're going to work part-time diligently every month and repay me. You won't have any free time until you've paid me back in full," Charlotte said firmly. "Oh no," Gabriella looked disheartened. Charlotte mentioned she would bring Gabriella back later for another apology and took her out of the restaurant. Brandon, in shock the entire time, seemed to snap back to reality and approached me in a flattering tone. "Look, it seems I was deceived. I can't live without you, Ariana, right? We still have the divorce papers here. Can we start over? You've always been a housewife, so you can't possibly work now, can you?" he pleaded. I listened to Brandon's pleas with a cold gaze, none of which moved me. I waited for him to finish before answering with a smile. "I can live just fine without you. I'll be taking the divorce papers and filing them shortly. Also, I never mentioned this, but my net worth is currently around $10 million, so I can live comfortably without working for the rest of my life. Rest assured." "10 million? Why did you keep such a fortune a secret?" Brandon asked, shocked. "I was about to tell you when you started making a fuss about divorce. This money is my inheritance, so it doesn't count towards marital assets. It has nothing to do with you," I replied. Brandon looked at me with utter despair. My lawyer quickly produced some documents and a pen for Brandon to sign. The lawyer and I then left and immediately filed for divorce, ending our almost 22-year marriage. Later, Gabriella transferred some money to my account, according to Charlotte. Upon learning of this incident, Gabriella's mother was furious. She made Gabriella take a leave from university and work non-stop at a relative's inn until she paid the compensation. Brandon, on the other hand, was disowned by his in-laws after they learned about the divorce. He was told he wouldn't receive any assistance, so he reluctantly took out a loan and paid me in one lump sum. Furthermore, it was revealed that he had been with Gabriella at a hotel during work hours. He was fired from his job and is now juggling multiple construction jobs to repay his debts. As for me, even after receiving such a large sum, I didn't know what to spend it on, so I donated half to charity. I then moved to the countryside with the remaining money, and I'm now enjoying a luxurious single life. I've continued my friendship with Charlotte. On our days off, we go on food tours and short trips. We both plan to stay single, so I suggested maybe we should share a room. Initially hesitant, Charlotte agreed when I mentioned we could share deliveries and she could join my meals. Moving preparations started the following week. As I packed up my old life, I felt a sense of excitement and anticipation for the new chapter ahead. The thought of living true to myself, free from the chains of a toxic marriage, filled me with joy. Charlotte and I found a beautiful house in the countryside. It was spacious and surrounded by lush greenery. We both loved the tranquility it offered, a stark contrast to the chaos and stress of city life. We set up a cozy living space, complete with a kitchen where we could continue our culinary adventures. As we settled into our new home, our days were filled with laughter and good food. We explored local markets, tried new recipes, and even started a small vegetable garden. The simplicity of our routine brought immense satisfaction. Charlotte and I grew even closer, sharing not just our home, but also our dreams and plans for the future. Despite the hardships I faced, I realized that my life had taken a turn for the better. The toxic relationship with Brandon was a thing of the past, and I had found a true friend in Charlotte. Together, we built a life filled with love, respect, and mutual support. One sunny afternoon, as Charlotte and I enjoyed a picnic in our garden, I reflected on my journey. I had gone from feeling trapped and undervalued to experiencing freedom and contentment. I had discovered strength I didn't know I possessed and learned the importance of standing up for myself. The lessons I learned during my marriage and the subsequent divorce were invaluable. They taught me resilience and the importance of self-worth. I realized that happiness comes from within and that surrounding yourself with supportive people makes all the difference. Charlotte and I often talked about our plans. We dreamed of traveling, exploring new cuisines, and perhaps starting a small business together. The possibilities seemed endless, and for the first time in a long while, I felt truly optimistic about the future. Life in the countryside was peaceful and fulfilling. The fresh air, the sound of birds, and the beauty of nature provided a perfect backdrop for our new beginning. I had found a sense of purpose and joy in the simple things, and it was a feeling I cherished deeply. As the days turned into weeks and then months, Charlotte and I continued to thrive. Our bond grew stronger, and our friendship became the foundation of our happiness. We supported each other through thick and thin, always knowing that we had someone to rely on. Looking back, I realized that leaving Brandon was the best decision I ever made. It allowed me to rediscover myself and build a life filled with love, laughter, and true companionship. Charlotte and I had created a haven where we could be ourselves, free from judgment and filled with joy. Let's conclude the story shortly. The divorce was finalized, and Brandon, burdened by his actions and debts, faded from Ariana's life. Gabriella, facing the consequences of her choices, was forced to work diligently to repay the compensation she owed. Ariana, liberated and financially secure, found solace and happiness in the countryside with her dear friend Charlotte. They built a life filled with laughter, good food, and mutual support, a stark contrast to the toxic relationship Ariana left behind. The story ends with Ariana reflecting on her journey, a testament to the strength she discovered within herself and the power of true friendship. She embraced her newfound freedom, cherishing the simple joys of life and the promise of a future filled with love, respect, and genuine companionship. After experiencing the full journey of our story, we'd love to hear your thoughts. How did the story resonate with you? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay blessed. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next story.